The dust storm that rolled through Pueblo, Colorado in the summer of 1882 brought more than just grit and sand into Ryan Sullivan's life. It brought her, a woman so covered in dirt and desperation that he almost didn't see the humanity beneath the layers of the road. She appeared at his doorstep like an apparition from the wasteland, her clothes torn and faded, her face streaked with trails where sweat had carved rivers through the dust, and her eyes held a haunted quality that spoke of miles walked and hardships endured. Ryan stood in the doorway of his small ranch house, his tall frame blocking most of the morning light, studying this unexpected visitor with the caution of a man who had learned that surprises in the frontier were rarely pleasant ones. "I am looking for work," she said, her voice hoarse and cracking like old leather. "Any work. I can clean, cook, mend, tend animals. I will do whatever needs doing." Ryan shifted his weight, his boots scraping against the wooden porch. He was 30 years old, weathered by sun and solitude, his face marked by the kind of loneliness that settles into a man's bones when he spends too many nights talking only to his horse. His ranch sat 3 miles outside Pueblo proper, a modest spread with a dozen cattle, a few horses, and a house that had fallen into disrepair since his mother passed 2 years prior. He had been managing barely, living in what could only be described as bachelor squalor, eating mostly beans and hardtack because cooking seemed pointless for just one person. "What is your name?" he asked, still blocking the door. "Nora," she replied. "Nora Owens." "You running from something, Miss Owens?" Her jaw tightened. "I am running toward survival, mister. My husband died of fever 3 months back in Kansas. His creditors took everything, even the furniture. I have been traveling west ever since, looking for a place to start over. I am not asking for charity. I will work for room and board and a small wage if you can spare it." Ryan studied her more carefully now. Despite the grime, he could see she was probably close to his age, maybe a year or two younger. Her hands were rough, the hands of someone who knew labor. There was no guile in her eyes, only exhaustion and a fierce determination that he recognized because he had seen it in his own mirror during the hardest times. "I do not have much," he said slowly. "This is not a grand operation. I am just getting by myself." "Then we will both be just getting by, but perhaps a bit more comfortably if I can help lighten your load." She swayed slightly, and Ryan realized she was close to collapsing. He made his decision quickly, stepping aside and gesturing into the house. "Come in. There is a pump out back where you can wash up. I will see about finding you some clean clothes, maybe something of my mother's that I packed away." Nora Owens walked past him into the dim interior, and Ryan caught a whiff of the road on her, dust and sweat, and the particular smell of someone who had been pushing themselves beyond reasonable limits. The house was a disaster, he realized with fresh eyes, seeing it as she must see it. Dishes piled in the basin, clothes strewn across chairs, dust coating every surface, and a general air of neglect that made the place feel more like a cave than a home. "I know it is a mess," he muttered, suddenly embarrassed. "It is nothing that soap and water and some elbow grease cannot fix," Nora said. And despite her exhaustion, there was something almost hopeful in her voice, as if the prospect of cleaning his disaster gave her purpose. Ryan showed her to the back where the pump stood, then went inside to dig through the trunk where he had stored his mother's belongings. Margaret Sullivan had been a practical woman, and her clothes reflected that. Simple dresses in sturdy fabrics, aprons, a few shawls. He selected what looked like it would fit and brought them out to where Nora was already working the pump handle, filling a bucket with water. "There is soap in the barn," he said, pointing, "and towels inside on the shelf by the fireplace. Take your time. I will be out checking the fence line. When you are ready, There is bread and some dried meat in the kitchen." He left her there, suddenly feeling awkward and uncertain. It had been so long since he had shared his space with anyone, and certainly never with a woman who was not his mother. As he walked toward the pasture, he wondered if he had just made a foolish decision. But something about Nora Owens had struck a chord in him. A recognition of shared loneliness, perhaps. Or maybe just the simple human decency of not turning away someone in genuine need. When Ryan returned 3 hours later, the transformation was startling. The kitchen was clean, the dishes washed and stacked neatly, the table scrubbed until the wood grain showed through. The floor had been swept, and through the open door to the main room, he could see that order had been imposed there too. And Nora herself was transformed. Her hair, which proved to be a rich chestnut brown, was pulled back in a neat braid, and his mother's blue dress fit her reasonably well, perhaps a bit loose, suggesting she had lost weight during her journey. Her face, now clean, showed fine features, high cheekbones, and those same determined eyes, though they looked less haunted now, more focused on the task at hand. "I hope you do not mind that I started without formal agreement," she said when she noticed him standing in the doorway. "I figured if you were going to turn me out, I might as well leave the place better than I found it." "I am not turning you out," Ryan said. "If you are willing to work, there is a place for you here. The small room off the kitchen was my mother's sewing room. There is a cot in there. It is not much, but it is private and the door has a lock if that makes you more comfortable." Relief flooded Nora's face. "Thank you, truly. You will not regret this." They worked out the details over a meal that Nora prepared from his meager supplies, somehow turning beans and salt pork into something that actually tasted good. She would handle the house, the cooking, the kitchen garden that had gone to weeds, and help with the lighter ranch work where needed. In exchange, she would have room and board plus $5 a month, which was about all Ryan could afford given the ranch's modest income. The first week passed in a blur of activity. Nora attacked the house with the fervor of someone who had been without purpose for too long. She washed every curtain, scrubbed every floor, organized the chaos that Ryan had been living in. The kitchen garden was weeded and replanted with late summer vegetables. She mended his clothes, stitched buttons back on shirts, and patched holes in his socks. The house began to smell like something other than stale air and bachelor neglect. It smelled like bread baking and soap, and occasionally, like the wildflowers she brought in from the fields and put in a jar on the table. Ryan found himself looking forward to coming back to the house each evening. For the first time in 2 years, there was someone to talk to, someone who asked about his day and actually listened to the answer. Nora was quiet but not cold, reserved but not unfriendly. She had a way of moving through space efficiently, never wasting motion, and he found himself watching her sometimes, fascinated by the simple competence she brought to every task. "You are staring," she said one evening as she was kneading bread dough at the kitchen table. Ryan felt heat rise to his face. "Sorry, I was just thinking how different the place feels now. Different good or different bad?" she asked, not looking up from her work. "Different good," he said firmly. "Very good, actually. I did not realize how far I had let things slide until you showed up and reminded me what a proper home looks like." Nora's hand stilled on the dough. "It is nice to be useful again. After Thomas died, after I lost everything, I felt like I was just drifting. No purpose, no direction. This gives me both." "Tell me about him," Ryan said, surprising himself with the question. "Your husband, I mean, if you want to talk about it." She resumed kneading, her hands working the dough with practiced rhythm. "Thomas Owens. We married when I was 19 and he was 22. He was a farmer, had a small place in Kansas that his father left him. We had 5 good years, nothing fancy, but we were building something. Then the fever came through. It took him in 3 days. Before I could even properly grieve, his creditors descended. Turned out he had borrowed against the farm to buy seed and equipment, and without him to work it, they foreclosed. I had nothing, no family left, nowhere to go. So I started walking west, picking up work where I could, sleeping in barns or under the stars, until I ended up here. I am sorry, Ryan said, and he meant it. Life is hard, Nora said simply. You endure or you do not. I chose to endure. Ryan understood that philosophy. He had his own losses to bear. His father had died when Ryan was 16, thrown from a horse that spooked during a storm. His mother had held the ranch together for another 12 years through sheer will and determination. But her heart had given out 2 winters ago, leaving Ryan alone with land that demanded constant work and a house that echoed with memories. As August faded into September, Ryan began to notice things about Nora that went beyond her competence as a housekeeper. The way she hummed while she worked, old songs he half remembered from childhood. The way her face softened when she found the litter of kittens in the barn and insisted on bringing them milk every morning. The way she laughed, rare but genuine, when one of the chickens chased him across the yard after he accidentally stepped too close to her nest. Nora was emerging from whatever protective shell she had built during her journey, and the woman underneath was someone Ryan found himself increasingly drawn to. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Ryan gathered his courage. "Can I ask you something personal?" Nora looked at him, her expression open. "You can ask. I may not answer, but you can ask. Do you ever think about staying here permanently? Not just as a housekeeper, I mean, but actually making this your home?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I think about it," she admitted. "This is the first place I have felt safe since Thomas died. The first place that has felt like a home rather than just a temporary stopping point. But I do not want to presume anything, Ryan. You have been generous beyond what I had any right to expect." "It is not generosity anymore," Ryan said, the words coming out in a rush. "At first, maybe, yes, I was just helping someone in need. But these past weeks, having you here, it has changed everything. I am not just existing anymore. I am living again. The house feels like a home. I find myself hurrying through my work so I can get back and hear about your day. I look forward to meals because you are across the table, and I wonder if maybe you might be feeling even a fraction of what I am starting to feel." Nora turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his face. "And what are you starting to feel, Ryan Sullivan?" He took a deep breath. "Like maybe I am not so lonely anymore. Like maybe there could be something here beyond just an employer and employee arrangement. Like maybe, given time, we could build something together." "I am not a project to be undertaken," Nora said carefully. "I am not some broken thing that needs fixing. I am a widow who has been through hell and is still finding her feet." "I know that," Ryan said quickly. "And I am not trying to take advantage or rush you into anything. I just wanted you to know that the option is there, that I would be proud to court you properly if you were open to it. No pressure, no expectations, just honesty about what I am feeling." Nora stood and walked to the porch, railing, her back to him. Ryan's heart sank, certain he had overstepped, that he had ruined the comfortable arrangement they had built. But when she turned back, there were tears on her cheeks, though she was smiling. "I thought I was imagining it," she said softly. "The way you looked at me sometimes, the extra care you took with your appearance in the mornings, the wildflowers you left on my pillow that you pretended you knew nothing about. I thought it was just wishful thinking on my part, that I was seeing what I wanted to see because being here with you has made me feel things I did not think I would ever feel again." Ryan stood, moving toward her but stopping a respectful distance away. "So you do feel something." "I feel terrified," Nora admitted. "I feel like I am betraying Thomas's memory by caring for someone else. I feel like I am being foolish for even considering opening my heart when it was so recently broken. But yes, Ryan, I feel something. When you come in from the fields and smile at me like I am the best thing in your day. When you ask my opinion about ranch matters like what I think actually matters. When you made sure the roof over my room was patched before the rains came, even though there were a dozen other tasks that were more pressing. Yes, I feel something." "Then let us take this slow," Ryan said. "Let us court properly. Let me earn your trust and your affection the right way. And whatever happens, you always have a place here. That does not change." Nora nodded, wiping her eyes. "Slow sounds good. Slow sounds safe." True to his word, Ryan courted Nora with old-fashioned deliberation. He asked permission to escort her to Sunday services in Pueblo, and she said yes. They rode into town in his wagon, sitting a proper distance apart, but talking the entire journey about everything and nothing. At the small church, Ryan introduced Nora to his few friends and acquaintances, making it clear by his attentiveness that she was someone special, not just his housekeeper. The women of Pueblo, starved for interesting gossip in their small community, were immediately curious about Nora Owens. Several approached her after the service, their questions veiled as friendly concern. Where was she from? How did she come to be at the Sullivan Ranch? What were her intentions? Nora handled them with grace, answering honestly but giving away only what she chose to share. She was a widow from Kansas, looking for a fresh start. Ryan Sullivan had generously offered her employment. Yes, she was very grateful for his kindness. No, she did not know how long she would be staying. One woman, Martha Pendleton, the wife of the town's general store owner, was more direct. "Ryan Sullivan is a good man," she said, her eyes sharp with assessment. "His mother was a dear friend of mine. I would hate to see him taken advantage of by someone who was just passing through." "I would hate that too," Nora replied evenly. "Ryan deserves nothing but honesty and respect, which is exactly what I intend to give him." Martha seemed satisfied with that answer, and afterward she invited Nora to join the ladies' quilting circle that met every other Wednesday. Nora accepted, recognizing the invitation for what it was, a test and an opportunity. If she could win over the women of Pueblo, her integration into the community would be much smoother. On the ride back to the ranch, Ryan was apologetic. "I should have warned you about Martha. She means well, but she can be protective." "She loved your mother," Nora said. "That is nothing to apologize for. If anything, it speaks well of your family that you inspire such loyalty." Ryan reached over and briefly squeezed her hand. It was the first time he had initiated physical contact, beyond helping her up into the wagon, and the warmth of his palm against hers sent a flutter through Nora's stomach. October brought cooler weather and the hard work of preparing for winter. Ryan and Nora worked together to lay in supplies, preserve what vegetables could be preserved, repair outbuildings, and ensure the animals were ready for the cold months ahead. They fell into an easy partnership, anticipating each other's needs, communicating with looks and small gestures as much as with words. One afternoon, while they were mending fence together, a task that required one person to hold the post steady while the other hammered, Nora asked about Ryan's family. "Your mother sounds like she was quite a woman." Martha clearly thought the world of her. Ryan paused in his hammering, a distant look in his eyes. "She was the strongest person I ever knew. When my father died, everyone expected her to sell the ranch and move into town. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and ran the place herself, with me helping when I was not in school." She taught me everything I know about ranching, about integrity, about perseverance. I miss her every day." "She would be proud of you," Nora said. "You have kept her legacy alive." "I have tried," Ryan said, "though I let the house go to hell, which she would not have been proud of." The house is not what matters. The land, the animals, the honor you conduct yourself with, that is what she cared about. And as for the house, well, it is a home again now. Ryan set down his hammer and looked at her directly. "Because of you, you brought it back to life." "You brought me back to life, if I am being honest." Nora felt her cheeks warm despite the cool air. "We brought each other back to life. I was just as lost as you were, Ryan, maybe more so." They stood there in the autumn sunshine, the mountains rising behind them, the wind carrying the scent of dried grass and pine, and something shifted between them. The careful distance they had been maintaining seemed suddenly unnecessary. Ryan took a step closer, then another, giving Nora every opportunity to step back. She did not. Instead, she tilted her face up toward his, her heart pounding. "May I kiss you?" Ryan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Nora whispered. The kiss was gentle, almost tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But there was warmth in it and promise, and when they pulled apart, Nora felt like something fundamental had changed. This was not just about companionship or mutual convenience anymore. This was the beginning of something real and deep and potentially wonderful. "I am falling in love with you," Ryan said, the words simple and honest. "I know it has only been a few months, and I know we both have ghosts we are carrying, but I cannot deny what I feel." Nora reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I am falling in love with you too, and it terrifies me because I know how much it hurts to lose someone you love. But I also know that hiding from love because of fear is no way to live." "Then we will be brave together," Ryan said, and kissed her again. The courtship after that became more openly affectionate. Ryan took to holding Nora's hand as they walked the property in the evenings. They sat closer together on the porch, shoulders touching, sharing warmth as the nights grew colder. Inside the house, there were small touches, a hand on the small of her back as he passed behind her in the kitchen, her fingers brushing his as she handed him his coffee in the morning. The people of Pueblo took note of the relationship developing between Ryan Sullivan and Nora Owens. At the quilting circle, the women peppered Nora with questions, some subtle, some less so. Nora answered what she felt comfortable answering and deflected the rest with humor and grace. She was proving to be an excellent quilter, her stitches small and even, and the older women approved of her work ethic and her respectful demeanor. Martha Pendleton, who had been the most skeptical initially, became one of Nora's strongest defenders. "That girl has been through the ringer," she told anyone who would listen. "And she has come out the other side with her dignity intact. Ryan is lucky to have her." In November, the first real snowstorm of the season hit, blanketing the ranch in 8 inches of heavy, wet snow. Ryan spent the day making sure the animals were secure and had access to food and water. He came in after dark, half frozen, his fingers too numb to properly work the buttons on his coat. Nora helped him, her own fingers deft and warm, peeling away the frozen layers and wrapping him in blankets by the fire. "You should have come in earlier," she scolded, though her voice was gentle. "You are frozen solid." "Had to make sure everyone was safe," Ryan mumbled through chattering teeth. Nora disappeared into the kitchen and returned with hot coffee laced with a bit of whiskey. "Drink this." Slowly. Ryan obeyed, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. Nora sat beside him, rubbing his hands between hers to restore circulation. The simple intimacy of the gesture, the care and concern in her actions, made Ryan's heart feel too large for his chest. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Nora's hand stilled. "What? Marry me," Ryan repeated, more firmly this time. "I know it is sudden, and I know we have only known each other a few months, but Nora, I cannot imagine my life without you anymore. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. You have made this house a home and filled a hole in my heart I did not even know was there. I love you. Marry me." Nora was crying, tears streaming down her face, but she was also smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Ryan Sullivan." Ryan set down his coffee cup and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, pouring all his love and relief and joy into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nora laughed. "That was quite possibly the worst-timed proposal in history," she said. "You are half frozen, we are snowed in, and you are drinking medicinal whiskey." "It was perfect timing," Ryan disagreed. "Because in that moment, I realized that every day I wait to make you my wife is a day wasted. Life is too short and too unpredictable. We both know that better than most." "When do you want to get married?" Nora asked, practical even in her joy. "As soon as the road's clear and we can get into town to talk to the minister," Ryan said. "Unless you want a big ceremony with lots of planning, I want to be your wife," Nora said simply. "The ceremony is just a formality. What matters is the commitment we are making to each other." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Pueblo, with Martha Pendleton and her husband standing as witnesses. Nora wore a simple cream-colored dress that Martha had helped her make, with lace at the collar that had belonged to Ryan's mother. Ryan wore his best suit, freshly cleaned and pressed, and the look in his eyes when Nora walked down the short aisle made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They spoke their vows in clear, firm voices, promising to love and honor each other through all the challenges life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ryan kissed Nora with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance wiped their eyes. There was a small celebration afterward at the Pendletons' home, with food and music and good wishes from the community that had accepted Nora as one of their own. As the sun began to set, Ryan and Nora made their excuses and headed home to the ranch, to the house that was now truly theirs together. That night, in the room that had been Ryan's but was now theirs to share, they came together as husband and wife with a mixture of nervousness and desire and deep affection. Nora had been married before, but this felt entirely new, as if she were discovering intimacy for the first time. Ryan was patient and gentle, attentive to her needs and responses, and what began as tentative exploration became a passionate affirmation of their love and commitment. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Nora's head on his chest and her hair spread across his shoulder, Ryan felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Nora asked, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin. "For walking through that dust storm into my life, for taking a chance on me, for loving me." Nora propped herself up on one elbow so she could see his face in the moonlight filtering through the window. "I am the one who should be thanking you. You saved me, Ryan. You gave me hope when I had none left. You gave me a home and a future and a love I thought I would never find again." "We saved each other," Ryan said, pulling her back down into his arms. "And we are going to build a beautiful life together." The winter months were cozy and intimate. While the snow piled high outside, Ryan and Nora created their own warm world within the house. They read to each other in the evenings by the fire, Ryan stumbling over some of the longer words in the books that had belonged to his mother, Nora patient and encouraging. They cooked together, learning each other's preferences and quirks. They talked for hours about their pasts, their dreams, their hopes for the future. Nora told Ryan about growing up in Ohio, the youngest of 4 children. Her father had been a blacksmith, her mother a seamstress. They had died within a year of each other when Nora was 17, and she had gone to live with an aunt in Kansas, where she eventually met Thomas. She spoke of her first husband with fondness, but without the deep grief that had characterized her earlier mentions of him. Thomas would always be a part of her history, but Ryan was her future. Ryan told Nora about his childhood on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about helping his father during roundups, about the devastating day the horse threw his father, and how his life had changed in that instant. He talked about his mother's strength and determination, about the lean years when they barely scraped by, about the pride he felt in maintaining the ranch she had fought so hard to keep. "I want to expand," he told Nora one snowy evening. "Not massively, but enough that we are not always just scraping by. Maybe double the herd, improve the breeding stock, possibly add some sheep." "What is stopping you?" Nora asked. "Capital, mostly, and fear, if I am honest. What if I invest everything and it fails? What if I lose the ranch like you lost your farm?" Nora took his hand. "Life has no guarantees, Ryan, but calculated risks are different from reckless ones. You know ranching, you know this land, you know what it can support. If you have a solid plan, I think you should pursue it. And whatever happens, we will face it together. That is what partnership means." Emboldened by her support, Ryan began making plans. He talked to other ranchers, consulted with the bank about loans, researched breeding programs that could improve his stock. Nora proved to be an asset in this as well, her sharp mind and practical nature helping him think through problems and potential pitfalls. Together, they crafted a 5-year plan that was ambitious but achievable. Spring came late in 1883, but when it finally arrived, it brought renewal and hope. Ryan secured a loan from the bank, purchased additional cattle and a quality bull, and expanded his grazing area. Nora planted an extensive kitchen garden and started raising chickens in earnest, planning to sell eggs in town to bring in extra income. They worked from dawn to dusk, exhausted but exhilarated by what they were building together. In May, Nora realized she was pregnant. She waited to tell Ryan until she was certain, then broke the news one evening over dinner. For a moment, he just stared at her, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Then he dropped the fork with a clatter, lunged around the table and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and protested that he would make her dizzy. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." "Yes, we are," Nora confirmed, her own joy matching his. "Sometime in early December, according to my calculations." Ryan set her down carefully, suddenly treating her like she was made of glass. "You should sit down. You should not be working so hard. We need to be careful." Nora laughed at his sudden protectiveness. "Ryan, pregnancy is not an illness. I am perfectly capable of continuing to work. I will let you know if I need to slow down." But Ryan was insistent on taking over the heavier chores, and Nora found his concern endearing even when it was excessive. As her pregnancy progressed and her belly began to swell with their growing child, Ryan became even more attentive, rubbing her feet when they swelled, bringing her tea and crackers in the morning when nausea struck, talking to her belly and telling their unborn child about the ranch and the life they would have. The women of Pueblo rallied around Nora, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and offering support. Martha Pendleton appointed herself as Nora's unofficial advisor on all things baby-related, having raised 5 children of her own. The quilting circle made a beautiful baby quilt, each woman contributing a square, creating a tangible representation of the community's acceptance and love. As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Nora entered her final months of pregnancy. She had to admit that the work was becoming more difficult as she grew larger and more uncomfortable. Ryan hired a young man from town, Samuel, to help with the heavier ranch work so Ryan could stay closer to the house. Samuel was 17, earnest and hardworking, and grateful for the employment and the opportunity to learn ranching from Ryan. In early December, on a cold night when the stars seemed close enough to touch, Nora went into labor. Ryan sent Samuel racing into town to fetch the midwife, Martha Pendleton, while he did his best to help Nora through the contractions. He had helped with animal births countless times, but this was entirely different. This was his wife, his love, and he felt utterly helpless in the face of her pain. Martha arrived within an hour, took one look at the situation, and calmly took charge. She sent Ryan to boil water and gather clean linens, giving him tasks to keep him occupied while she examined Nora. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Ryan paced the main room, flinching at every cry from the bedroom, praying to a God he was not sure he believed in to please let both Nora and the baby be all right. Finally, as the winter sun climbed above the mountains, the thin wail of a newborn cut through the air. Ryan froze, barely breathing, until Martha emerged from the bedroom smiling. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy, and Nora is tired but well." Ryan rushed past her into the bedroom where Nora lay, exhausted and pale but smiling, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up at him with such love and pride that Ryan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Meet your son," she said softly. Ryan approached carefully, looking down at the tiny red face, the miniature fingers curled into fists, the rosebud mouth. His son. His and Nora's. The miracle of it overwhelmed him. "He is perfect," Ryan whispered. "You are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Nora said. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never definitively decided. Looking at his son now, Ryan knew. "Matthew, after my father." "Matthew Sullivan." Nora smiled. "Matthew, I like that. Welcome to the world, Matthew Sullivan." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Matthew proved to be a healthy baby with a good appetite and strong lungs. He was not afraid to use in the middle of the night. Ryan and Nora stumbled through those early weeks in a haze of sleep deprivation and constant worry, learning as they went, making mistakes and correcting them, gradually figuring out what their son needed and when. Ryan was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Matthew when he was fussy, singing terrible off-key lullabies that somehow soothed the baby even if they made Nora laugh. She watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love with him, marveling at the gentleness he showed, the infinite patience, the fierce protectiveness. As winter gave way to spring and spring to summer, Matthew grew from a tiny infant into a chubby, smiling baby who recognized his parents and lit up when he saw them. The ranch continued to prosper under Ryan's careful management and Nora's support. The expansion had been successful, and they were able to pay down the loan faster than anticipated. Life was not without its challenges. There were droughts and illness among the cattle, equipment that broke at the worst possible times, and the constant worry about money and weather, and all the thousand things that could go wrong on a ranch. But they faced each challenge together, their partnership strengthened by love and mutual respect. One evening in late summer of 1884, as they sat on the porch watching Matthew take tottering first steps across the yard while trying to catch a chicken, Nora leaned her head on Ryan's shoulder. "Are you happy?" she asked. Ryan thought about it, taking his time to answer because he wanted to be truthful. "I am happier than I ever imagined I could be. There are hard days, sure, and times when I worry about whether we will make it through, but even on the hardest days, I have you and Matthew. I have a purpose and a family and a home that is filled with love. So yes, Nora, I am happy." "Are you?" "I am," Nora said. "When I walked up to your door that day, covered in dust and desperate, I could not have imagined this life. I thought I was just looking for a job, a place to stay temporarily while I figured out what to do with myself. Instead, I found everything I did not even know I was looking for. I found home. I found love. I found myself again." Ryan kissed the top of her head. "You gave me all those same things. You cleaned my house, but you also cleaned out all the loneliness and grief I had been living with. You filled the empty spaces. You made me want to be better, do better, build something meaningful." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son's antics, the sun setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The chickens clucked in their coop, the cattle lowed in the distance, and somewhere a coyote called to the rising moon. It was an ordinary evening, one of thousands they would share, and yet it was also extraordinary because they were together. The years rolled on, bringing changes and growth. Matthew grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and the animals, and following his father around asking endless questions. In 1886, Nora gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose after the wild roses that bloomed on the hillside each summer. She had Nora's chestnut hair and Ryan's green eyes, and her older brother was completely smitten with her from the moment he met her. The ranch continued to prosper. Ryan's careful planning and hard work paid off, and they expanded again, purchasing additional land when a neighboring homesteader decided to move back east. They built a larger barn, improved the house with an additional room for the children, and purchased better equipment that made the work more efficient. Nora became a pillar of the community, known for her kindness, her capability, and her willingness to help neighbors in need. When illness struck a family, she was there with food and offers to help with children or animals. When someone needed advice or just a friendly ear, she provided it without judgment. The woman who had arrived in Pueblo covered in dust and desperation had become someone the community relied upon and respected. Martha Pendleton, now in her late 60s and slowing down, often remarked that Nora reminded her of Ryan's mother, Margaret. "You have that same strength," she told Nora one afternoon at Quilting Circle. "That same determination and grace. Margaret would have been so proud to call you daughter." The comment made Nora cry, which she blamed on being pregnant again. Their third child, another boy they named Robert, arrived in the spring of 1888. With 3 children now, the house was noisy and chaotic and full of life. Ryan built onto the house again, adding a proper second floor with bedrooms for the children so they were not all cramped into one space. The ranch was successful enough now that they could afford to hire help regularly. Samuel, who had started as a young apprentice, was now in his early 20s and Ryan's right-hand man, running much of the day-to-day operations. They hired a young woman from town to help Nora with the house and the children, giving her more time to focus on the parts of ranch life she enjoyed, like managing the chickens and the kitchen garden and the ranch accounts. One evening in 1890, as Ryan and Nora sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard, Matthew, now 7, and helping his 5-year-old sister, Rose, build something with sticks while 2-year-old Robert toddled around getting in the way, Ryan reflected on how much had changed. 8 years ago, I was living in a house that was falling apart, eating beans from a can, talking to my horse because there was no one else to talk to. he said. I was just going through the motions of life without really living. 8 years ago, I was walking through a dust storm, half-starved, with no idea where I would sleep that night or if I would survive another week, Nora replied. I had given up on ever being happy again. Ryan took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, a gesture so familiar now it was automatic. You know what I think about sometimes? What would have happened if you had walked past my ranch, if you had kept going to the next homestead or into town instead of knocking on my door? I think about that too, Nora admitted. And it terrifies me because we so easily could have missed each other. Our entire lives, our children's very existence, came down to chance and desperation and a dust storm. I do not believe it was chance, Ryan said. I think you were meant to walk through that dust storm to my door. I think we were meant to find each other, to save each other, to build this life together. Either way, I am grateful, Nora said, squeezing his hand. Every single day I am grateful. As their children grew, Ryan and Nora made sure to tell them the story of how their parents met. Not the sanitized version, but the real story, complete with the hardships and the losses, and the courage it took to start over. They wanted their children to understand that good things often came from difficult circumstances, that love could be found even in the darkest times, and that home was not just a place, but the people you chose to build a life with. Matthew, who proved to have his father's aptitude for ranching and his mother's head for numbers, announced at age 12 that he wanted to run the ranch someday. Ryan and Nora supported this dream, teaching him everything they could about animal husbandry, land management, and business. Rose, artistic and imaginative, loved to draw and paint, capturing the landscape and the animals with a skill that amazed her parents. Robert, the youngest, was a natural charmer with an adventurous spirit who kept them all on their toes with his escapades. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1895, the Sullivan Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the area, known for quality cattle and honest dealings. Ryan and Nora had paid off all their loans and were able to provide a comfortable life for their family without the constant worry that had characterized the early years. But success did not change who they were at their core. Ryan still worked alongside his men, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. Nora still made most of their clothes, still tended her garden, still welcomed neighbors with genuine warmth. They raised their children with the same values they lived by: hard work, integrity, compassion, and gratitude. In the summer of 1896, Matthew turned 13, Rose turned 11, and Robert turned 8. The children were growing up fast, becoming their own people with their own dreams and personalities. Ryan and Nora watched this with a mixture of pride and melancholy, aware that the years of having small children at home were passing quickly. One night after the children were asleep, Ryan and Nora sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. The night was warm, the stars brilliant in the clear mountain air, and fireflies danced in the grass beyond the house. "Can you believe it has been 14 years since you knocked on my door?" Ryan asked. 14 years, Nora repeated, shaking her head in wonder. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like we have always been together." "Do you ever regret it, any of it?" Ryan asked. Nora looked at him, surprised by the question. "Regret? Ryan, you gave me back my life. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose, and a love that sustains me every day. What could I possibly regret?" "I do not know," Ryan admitted. "Sometimes I worry that you gave up opportunities, that maybe if you had gone into town that day instead of stopping here, you might have had an easier life, more choices." Nora reached over and took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "Listen to me, Ryan Sullivan. I chose you. I choose you still, every single day. This life we have built is not just easy comfort. It is meaningful work and genuine partnership and deep love. I am exactly where I want to be with exactly who I want to be with. Do you understand? Ryan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. I love you so much, Nora, more than I could ever put into words. I love you too, Nora said. You are my home, Ryan. You always have been. They sat together under the stars, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful from dust and desperation and determination. Their journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every difficulty, every hardship, every moment of doubt. As the years continued to pass, Ryan and Nora settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long, loving marriage. They had disagreements, as all couples do, but they had learned early on how to communicate, how to compromise, how to put their partnership above their individual pride. They weathered storms, both literal and figurative, supporting each other through illnesses and market downturns and the normal crises of raising children. Matthew, as expected, took over more and more of the ranch operations as he grew into young adulthood. By 18, he was managing significant portions of the business, and Ryan could not have been prouder. Rose discovered a talent for teaching and began working at the small school in Pueblo, bringing her artistic sensibility to education in ways that inspired her students. Robert, true to his adventurous nature, talked about becoming a lawman or possibly joining the cavalry, dreams that made Nora worry, but that they supported nonetheless. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Ryan turned 48 and Nora turned 46. They had gray in their hair now and lines on their faces, the marks of years lived fully. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had fallen in love with, the lonely cowboy and the desperate woman covered in dust who had taken a chance on each other and won. On a spring morning in 1901, Nora was working in her garden when she looked up to see a young woman approaching the house, covered in road dust, her clothes worn and her face weary. For a moment, Nora was transported back nearly 20 years to the day she had arrived at this same house in nearly the same condition. The young woman saw Nora and straightened her shoulders, clearly gathering her courage. "Excuse me, madam. I am looking for work, any kind of work. I can clean, cook, mend, whatever you need. I will work hard, I promise." Nora set down her gardening tools and approached the young woman, seeing herself in those desperate, hopeful eyes. "What is your name?" "Clara, madam, Clara Miller." "Come inside, Clara," Nora said warmly. "Let us get you cleaned up and fed, and then we can talk about what you need and what we might be able to offer." Ryan came in from the barn to find his wife sitting at the kitchen table with a young woman who looked like she had been through hell, and he understood immediately what was happening. His eyes met Nora's, and they shared a look of complete understanding. They had been given a second chance all those years ago. Now it was their turn to offer that chance to someone else. That evening, after Clara had been settled in one of the upstairs rooms and was resting from her ordeal, Ryan and Nora sat on their porch. "She reminds me so much of you," Ryan said quietly. "That same determination mixed with desperation, that same fierce will to survive." "She reminds me of me too," Nora agreed. "And it made me realize how far we have come, that we are now in a position to help someone the way you helped me. It feels like coming full circle." "Are you thinking of hiring her?" Ryan asked. "If she wants to stay, yes," Nora said. "Rose is busy with teaching and I could use help with the house. And more than that, I remember what it was like to feel completely alone in the world. If we can ease that burden for her even a little, it is the right thing to do." Ryan put his arm around his wife. "This is why I love you. Your capacity for compassion, for seeing other people's pain and wanting to help. You never forgot where you came from." "How could I?" Nora said. "My past made me who I am. The hardships taught me strength, and the kindness you showed me taught me the importance of extending that kindness to others." Clara proved to be an excellent worker, much like Nora had been. She integrated into the household smoothly, getting along well with the Sullivan children, and taking direction from Nora with gratitude and respect. Over the following months, she slowly shared her story, a tale not unlike Nora's own, involving loss and poverty and the decision to head west in search of a better life. Watching Clara's transformation from desperate wanderer to confident young woman reminded Ryan and Nora of their own journey. They saw in her the same resilience they had drawn on during their own difficult times, the same determination to build something better. Matthew, now 20 and very much a man, took notice of Clara as well. Nora watched with amusement and a bit of knowing melancholy as her son found excuses to be in the house more often, to help with tasks that brought him into contact with the young woman. History, it seemed, had a way of repeating itself in the best possible ways. But that was a story for another time. For now, Ryan and Nora were content with what they had built, a thriving ranch, 3 wonderful children growing into capable adults, and a love that had not only endured but deepened over nearly 2 decades. On their 20th anniversary of the day Nora had first knocked on Ryan's door, they decided to renew their vows in the same small church where they had married. The whole community turned out for the celebration, a testament to the lives they had lived and the respect they had earned. As Nora walked down the aisle toward Ryan, her children watching with tears and smiles, she thought about that dust-covered, desperate woman she had been 20 years earlier. That woman could never have imagined this life, this happiness, this fullness of heart. And yet it was all real, all earned through courage and love and the willingness to take a chance on someone she barely knew. Ryan watched Nora approach, still seeing the most beautiful woman in the world, still feeling his heart skip a beat the way it had when they first kissed. The years had changed them both, but the essential connection, that recognition of kindred spirits that had sparked that very first day, remained as strong as ever. They spoke their vows again, the same words from 2 decades earlier but with even more meaning now, weighted with years of shared experience, of challenges faced together, of joys multiplied by being shared. When Ryan kissed his wife, the applause and cheers faded away until it was just the two of them, connected by a love that had survived everything life threw at them. The celebration afterward was joyous, with food and music and dancing. Ryan and Nora moved through it together, accepting congratulations and good wishes, but always returning to each other's side, drawn by a gravity that distance made uncomfortable. As the sun began to set and the party wound down, Matthew made a toast. At 20, he was poised on the edge of his own adult life, but he looked at his parents with uncomplicated admiration and love. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day. Who showed us that hard work and integrity and compassion are the foundations of a good life. Who built something beautiful from nothing but determination and hope. May we all be so lucky as to find what you found in each other." The guests raised their glasses, echoing the sentiment, and Ryan felt Nora's hand tighten in his. They had done it. They had built not just a successful ranch but a good life, a meaningful legacy, a family that would carry forward the values they held dear. As the evening drew to a close and the guests departed, Ryan and Nora found themselves alone on their porch once more, looking out at the land they had worked so hard to improve, the home they had filled with love and laughter. 20 years, Ryan mused. It has gone so fast. The best years of my life, Nora said. Every single one of them. Even the hard years. The drought year, the year Robert was so sick we thought we would lose him, all the struggles, especially those years, Nora said firmly. Because they taught us what we were capable of, how strong we were together. The easy times are nice, but it is the difficult times that really forge a marriage, that prove whether love is just a pretty feeling or something deeper and more enduring. Ryan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, lavender and bread and the particular fragrance that was uniquely Nora. I would live it all again, every hard day, every worry, every challenge, just to end up right here with you. Me too, Nora whispered. Every single moment. They stood together as the stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had witnessed their first tentative conversations, their first kiss, their wedding night, and countless evenings since. The land stretched out before them, peaceful and productive, a testament to what could be built with love and determination. Matthew took over the ranch completely when he was 25, marrying Clara in a ceremony that made his parents smile with the symmetry of it all. Ryan and Nora stepped back from the day-to-day operations, though they remained involved and available for advice. They had more time now for each other, for travel, for the grandchildren that began arriving with delightful regularity. Rose married a teacher she met in Pueblo, a kind man who supported her artistic pursuits, and they settled nearby, giving Nora regular opportunities to see her daughter and help with her grandchildren. Robert surprised no one by becoming a sheriff in a neighboring county, using his natural charisma and sense of justice to keep the peace. As Ryan and Nora moved into their later years, they took great joy in watching their children build their own lives and families, carrying forward the values they had been taught. The ranch prospered under Matthew's management, growing even beyond what Ryan had dreamed possible. But more important than the material success was the culture Matthew maintained, treating workers fairly, conducting business with integrity, supporting the community just as his parents had done. In 1915, Ryan turned 63 and Nora turned 61. They were slowing down physically, feeling the accumulated aches and pains of lives lived doing hard physical labor. But their minds remained sharp, and their love for each other remained the bedrock of their existence. One summer evening, they sat on the porch that had been witness to so much of their life together. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, 6 of them ranging in age from 2 to 10, their laughter filling the air. Matthew and Clara were managing the ranch house now, and Ryan and Nora had moved into a smaller house on the property that Matthew had built for them, a comfortable space that was just right for 2. "Did you ever imagine it would be like this?" Nora asked, watching her grandchildren play. "That day you opened your door to find a dust-covered stranger asking for work. Did you imagine this?" Ryan laughed. "I could not have imagined this in my wildest dreams. I was just a lonely man in a dirty house, trying to figure out how to make it through another day." "You were a miracle I did not know I needed." "We needed each other," Nora corrected gently. "That is what made it work. It was not one person saving the other. It was 2 broken people putting their pieces together and discovering they fit." "We did fit," Ryan agreed. "From the very beginning, even before we knew it, we fit." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from decades of shared life, where words are often unnecessary because the understanding runs so deep. The sun painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, and somewhere a meadowlark sang its evening song. "You have any regrets?" Nora asked. "Anything you wish you had done differently?" Ryan thought about it seriously, giving the question the consideration it deserved. "I wish I had kissed you sooner," he finally said with a smile. "I wish I had proposed sooner. I wish I had not wasted a single day being cautious when I could have been loving you openly from the start." Nora laughed, the sound still as musical to Ryan's ears as it had been 33 years ago when he first heard it. "You were not cautious. You were respectful. You gave me time to heal, to trust again. That was exactly what I needed." "Then no," Ryan said. "No regrets. What about you?" "Only that I cannot live it all over again," Nora said. "This life, this love, these children and grandchildren, all of it has been more than I ever dreamed possible. If I have any regret, it is just that life is finite, that there will be an end to this someday." Ryan squeezed her hand. "Then we will make the most of whatever time we have. We will keep choosing each other, keep choosing love for as long as we both draw breath." "Deal," Nora said, smiling through tears. They lived many more good years, watching their grandchildren grow, welcoming new grandchildren, seeing their children thrive in their own marriages and careers. The Sullivan Ranch became something of a legend in the region, not just for its success, but for the family values it represented, the integrity with which it operated, the care it showed to workers and community alike. When Ryan passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1922 at the age of 70, Nora mourned deeply, but without despair. They had been granted 40 years together, far more than many couples received, and they had filled those years with love and purpose and joy. She knew how lucky she had been, how rare their connection had been. Nora lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren who adored her, sharing stories of the past and wisdom gained from a life well lived. She told and retold the story of how she and Ryan met, of the dust storm and the desperate knock on the door, and the lonely cowboy who had taken a chance on a stranger. She wanted her descendants to understand that love could be found in the most unlikely circumstances, that hope could spring from desperation, that courage and compassion could change everything. When Nora passed away peacefully in 1927 at the age of 73, she was buried next to Ryan on the hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their headstones were simple but meaningful, bearing their names and dates and a single phrase that captured the essence of their lives. Together, they built something beautiful. The ranch passed to Matthew, and then to his children and beyond, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Ryan and Nora had laid. The house where it all began was preserved and maintained, a reminder of humble beginnings and the transformative power of love. And on quiet evenings, when the stars emerged and the wind whispered through the grass, some said you could still feel their presence there, the lonely cowboy and the dust-covered woman who had found each other against all odds and built a love that lasted beyond a lifetime, a legacy that would echo through generations, a reminder that the bravest thing anyone can do is open their door to hope, take a chance on love, and choose each other every single day. The story of Ryan Sullivan and Nora Owens became part of local legend, told to young couples starting their own journeys, shared at wedding celebrations, remembered as proof that love could be found even in the hardest circumstances. Their great-grandchildren grew up hearing the tale, understanding that they came from people who had faced adversity with courage, who had built something from nothing, who had proven that a lonely heart could be filled, an empty house could become a home, and a desperate knock on a door could change everything. The Sullivan Ranch thrived well into the next century, but more important than its material success was the culture of love, integrity, and compassion that Ryan and Nora had established. Every generation that followed understood that they were not just running a business but continuing a legacy of values, of treating people with dignity, of choosing love over fear, of opening doors to those in need just as their ancestors had done. And so, while Ryan and Nora's time on Earth was finite, the love they shared, the life they built, and the values they lived by continued on, rippling forward through time, touching lives they would never meet, inspiring people they would never know. Their story was proof that one moment of compassion, one decision to help a stranger, one choice to love bravely could create echoes that lasted forever. From dust and desperation, they had built beauty. From loneliness and loss, they had created family. From a single knock on a door, they had forged a legacy of love that would endure as long as the mountains stood watch over the land they had called home. And that, perhaps, was the greatest achievement of all, not wealth or success or fame, but the simple, profound triumph of two hearts finding each other in a difficult world and choosing to beat as one for the rest of their days.